Greetings and a very warm welcome. I am Dev, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to the fifth episode of Climate Baithak. Let me just take a moment to very briefly discuss as to why we are here. The South Asian region, which is home to nearly a quarter of world population, is alarmingly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Young people across South Asia are at the forefront of an evolving climate crisis. It is in this context that Climate Baithak has become our platform to know about the collective challenges, where we bring forth the experiences from different corners of this vast region to forge a deeper understanding and a sense of solidarity of our shared experiences. Throughout this series, we aim to highlight these young voices, bringing together a diverse group of passionate individuals across South Asian region who are not just witness to the positive and tangible change that is already happening, but are the ones driving it. Without further ado, now let me take some time to introduce our guest, Ms. Prakriti Koirala from the Republic of Nepal. Prakriti Koirala is an environmental officer associated with a Green Shift Nepal project, which is a EU funded project. She is a researcher holding a master's degree in environmental science with a specialization in climate change and disaster risk management. For several years now, she has been actively engaging in climate activism and advocacy through different national youth organizations. Since COP26, she has been attending UNFCCC negotiations following the loss and damage thematic issue and assisting the government of Nepal in various capacities. Prakriti is a passionate person who is willing to contribute to climate action and sustainability. Thank you so much for taking out time to be here, Prakriti, today with us. It is absolutely a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank
Just to
you.
get
Thank you so much.
Honestly, a pleasure, Prakriti. Looking forward to a wonderful, engaging, interactive conversation with you. So, just to get started, I'm really curious to ask you, Prakriti, that as a young person working in the climate vulnerable and sensitive region, which is Nepal, how do you see the climate justice movement, specifically the movement wherein the young people are taking leadership positions, the youth-led climate justice discourse, which is picking up some pace in the recent times, responding to this unprecedented climate crisis? I mean, the impacts of the climate change have become more visible in the recent times, specifically in the last decade or so. So, how do you see these young movements, these grassroots organizations, climate justice activists and organizers have consolidated together to respond to this unprecedented crisis situation? To you, Prakriti.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and also for the question. There are many youth-led organization having the climate justice movement in Nepal. To rightly mention, there is Nepalese Youth for Climate Action, which also has its branch in different districts, and there is another organization, youth network called Climate Nepal, which I'm also part of, and another Digo Vikas Institute. There are many others who are actively participating in protest and pressuring the government and also assisting by doing research. And also there are many youth who are directly involved in COP, as I mentioned earlier. There are many youth from Nepalese Youth for Climate Action. They are participating every year in COP and this kind of negotiation process and trying to get in front of discussions and to get them heard, everything. So yeah, we are trying our best, but uh, if we get support from different level of government, NGOs or the private sectors, it could have been more efficient. But I must say the initiation that organizations, the movements from that are led by youth in Nepal, that is, I can see hope. Like, I'm hopeful that we are getting in the track. Yeah, but there are many things that need to be improved itself. But yeah, overall, I think it's like I'm hopeful.
Lovely. Hopeful is, I think, the right choice of word, Prakriti, in this context. We all are trying our best, specifically the youth-led movements. I think they have, I would say, they are at a very nascent stage when it comes to actually being in the mainstream climate justice discourse, which has happened like sometime before us in the Western countries. However, in South Asia, the movement is still, I think, at a very nascent stage. So that is one. But do you think that, you mentioned people coming up and being more cognizant and aware of what is happening and how their lives and livelihoods, their communities are potentially going to get impacted with this crisis situation. So, in this context, do you think people who are at the forefronts of the movement also include the ones who belong to the MAPA communities? The most affected people and areas, which specifically include the vulnerable population segments. That can be indigenous people, people belonging to socioeconomic backward classes, people who belong to the sexual and gender minority groups. So these marginalized and vulnerable communities and groups, do you think these folks are also being included in the mainstream climate justice movement, or you think it's still very reclusive as an entity, just having people from the privileged backgrounds? Do you, Prakriti?
Yeah, this is very interesting question, and I'm very happy to answer this. Let me give you an example. As I told you earlier, there is a network called Nepalese Youth for Climate Action (NYCA), and it has network in many districts of Nepal. And there are also many youth representing this organization in different national and international platforms like COP and everything. So in the year 2021, 2022. It was led by a youth named Umesh, who belongs to like differently abled marginalized community. He was leading the group, and he was leading and advocating for his community in each forum, like how people from his community are more affected when there is flood. They are the one who are like affected the most. So he used to advocate in every platforms, and there are many other such organizations trying to get inclusive in every aspects, the marginalized, vulnerable, and disadvantaged group of people are the one who are impacted the most, and this kind of change in climate. So if such this is just an example, but as you said, but there are areas for improvement as well, since Nepal is very diverse in terms of geography, topography, and ethnicity and religion, and it is very challenging as well to ensure all these inclusiveness. But as I gave you an example, this is just an example, but there are many other young people who belong to that community, and they're representing their community. But I must say they are from they are the one who belong to the urban areas. And as you rightly mentioned, we need to get we need to bridge the gap from to the gap between the young people who are advocating from the urban areas and the people who are mostly affected and belong to these communities who are in the rural areas where they don't have access to all these kind of things. But still, as I mentioned, like Umesh led the organization very nicely for 2 years. It was kind of exemplary for many other as well. So yeah, there are a few organizations that are working in this sector to ensure the inclusiveness as well.
Thank you so much, Prakriti, for putting that up very nicely. I do agree there is a very imminent need for us to bridge that gap which exists right now. Because when we talk about the marginalized sections of our society, specifically those people and communities belonging to the MAPA, segment, for instance, people who might be located at areas which are more sensitive to climate shocks, or maybe people whose identities make it very difficult for them
Yeah.
to adapt or become more resilient towards the changing climate. So I think these people, since they are being, they are placed at the epicenter of the climate crisis. These are the
Yeah.
people who are likely to get most impacted in case of any natural disaster caused, or maybe reinforced by the changing climate dynamics. So it's very important for us to have these voices in the center. I think this is the fifth episode of this whole conversation that I'm having with you, and I think my counterparts from different countries, they mentioned the same thing. It is absolutely important for having these the people coming from these communities and these backgrounds at the forefronts of our movement, to make it more inclusive, and at the same time to strengthen our overall adaptive and resilience building efforts.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for putting that up. One more important aspect which emerges from this whole conversation is what happens to loss and damage which has already occurred, and it still go unnoticed, under researched, and it is still undocumented. I mean, I read about you. You have been working specifically in the loss and damage thematic area. Even you are working with your government as well with this respect. So I was wondering, since Nepal has been facing a lot of socio-economic problems stemming from irregular factors, as in like irregular precipitation patterns,
Yeah.
rainfall, monsoon, and then something very recently which I read about is accelerated glacial melting,
Yeah.
which has affected vulnerable populations and has caused immense loss to life and property. I mean, I was so surprised. The glaciers in Himalayan region are now melting twice as fast than they used to 25 years back.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, Nepal's geography is extremely susceptible to floods and extreme landslides. So, for some people and some places, it is also very imminent that no amount of adaptation measures that you undertake would now, it's, I think it's too late, because for some specific places and regions, I think the loss and damage has already occurred with the existing levels of global warming. I mean, it's kind of a domino effect that is now that is something that we are
Yes.
seeing now. So I think it is beyond the adaptation stage now. So for Nepal specifically, how do you see the adaptation and resilience building efforts shaping amidst these climate shocks, and given the peculiar topography and the economic situation over there? To you, Prakriti.
Yeah, yeah. You rightly mentioned the impacts of climate change that we are facing. We have the Rai region and the mid hills and Himalayas that are differently impacted by the change in climate, and loss and damage is something we call, like, when it is beyond adaptation we call it loss and damage, like we cannot adapt to it. We have invest much in adaptation, and resilience building, of course, but due to lack of resources and also resources, we are not able to say that these are the effects that are caused due to climate change. We cannot say it like confidently because we don't have such kind of research that are dedicated to these kind of disasters. Maybe that is human caused, or maybe that were caused due to some construction or something like that, and we cannot claim them that these are the things that we are getting impact due to climate change. We are facing the loss and damage due to climate change. We are not able to claim because of the lack of resource, which is due to lack of resources and also our capacity. And yeah, as you mentioned, I have been following loss and damage in the climate change negotiation process for like 2 years now, and I from my experience, I can conclude that it's not that easy, because to claim the loss and damage fund as well, it's very difficult. It's beyond our capacity, and the fund that are dedicated to adaptation, and also there is other commitments like $100 billion and everything. We don't have resources to eat. And as you know, we have developed nationally determined contribution. Every countries have prepared and submitted to UNFCCC, and in this nationally determined contribution, we set the target based on mitigation, like we will deduct the amount of emission from this sector by this year if we get fund for it. There are many like conditional target rather than on like inconditional, that we can do it by our own and something like that. So we have many targets that are conditional, that we can do only if we get funds, and that is the similar in national adaptation plan as well. There are many like plans in many sectors, but we are not able to implement all these things on our own. And to get the finance, it's very difficult, it's very tricky. And there is also idea of doubling the adaptation finance that we are getting from the developed countries. And since the COP is party driven process, and it is if only one party gets does not agree, then it will get postponed to another year. So it's very difficult to get the fund which is very necessary for us. But in our policies and in our plans, we have included many aspects of national adaptation plans and napa. So there are many things going on in adaptation and resilience building, but it's not enough. And I can conclude that it is lack of due to lack of support, like financial, technical, economic, everything. So yeah, that's the case.
I mean, it totally makes sense because hardly when we talk about climate finance, I think for a lot of things there is very less money available, and that too, the money which come through these with different streams to the government agencies. I mean, I just know of adaptation fund which was set up under the Kyoto Protocol in 2001. Then comes the Green Climate Fund, which was something they did in 2010, which was done by United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change.
Mhm.
Then it comes the Global Environment Facility. And specifically for Nepal, I think Global Environment Facility has been sponsoring some of your adaptation efforts, which were government sponsored. I mean, but I was going through the funds. They are just very menial. These funds hardly would have the potential to make any tangible difference for countries so vast and so big. So
Yeah.
I mean that's kind of sad, to just see how these funds actually are not working.
Yeah, also to get the funds, like green climate fund, the process to put the proposals and everything, to get the to pass the proposal, to meet their framework, everything is very
Yeah.
huge, which is beyond our capacity. And if even if we get the fund, it's like very limited, as you said. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Very true. And since we already touched on climate finance, how do you view the accessibility of these crucial development funds for grassroots organizations? You slightly mentioned that it's already difficult, but since these development funds need not come from these external agencies, but they can also come from government agencies or through CSR, efforts by corporate houses. So when I was talking during my previous conversations with the counterparts from Bangladesh, Pakistan, Maldives, and India itself, we all shared a similar view on the hardships while accessing these very crucial financial support for organizations such as ours, because funding for such grassroots movements is very scarce and many relying entirely on volunteers. So, how do you see in this situation with respect to Nepal? How do you compare the situation in Nepal, and in what ways do you think that the lack of these funds hinder the progress of these grassroots movements led by young people primarily? To you, Prakriti.
Yeah, that's the same in Nepal as well. First of all, the finance that they try to give, they encourage loans rather than grants. They prefer loans, and rather than grants, we have been protesting that we don't need loans. Like, it's a question of climate justice. This reparation, we need the grants and everything. So yeah, even if it comes to the grassroots organizations, and it's like youth led organization, we most of us are volunteering the organization, and only due to lack of the resources, we couldn't do what we for example, I like to give example of my own. I worked in a network called Climate Nepal, and we try to work in the grassroots level, creating awareness among people, like students, and training them, and building the climate smart schools and everything. We had a huge concept, but due to lack of resources, we couldn't do it. We couldn't do it like anything, because we cannot uh, we are just a graduate student leading the organization, and only because of lack of fund, we had to drop the idea. And yeah, that's only an example, but there are many such things that hinders our vision, only because of the resources that we don't have. we don't get directly to the organization like ours.
Very, very true. Thank you so much for sharing that example, Prakriti. I think we all resonate somehow in some
Yeah.
sorts and bits to it. Prakriti, you spoke about earlier in the conversation. I remember you spoke when the loss and damage only comes when the adaptation efforts fail, when the adaptation is not enough to prevent that loss and damage, right? So I feel there are some limits to adaptation, as we all know. When adaptation limit is reached, then loss and damage are inevitable, and this even the escalated adaptation efforts are no longer able to reduce the negative impacts. So in this background, I'm curious to hear from you as to what you think are some critical aspects of the climate change mitigation or developing resilience and adaptation, where you think that young climate organizers, activists like yourself, and overall people who are working in the policy making realm have an overall consensus on. I mean, where are we all headed? What do we actually want out of the whole movement? For instance, in Nepal, is it building more resilient climate systems? Or is it better or enhanced capacity mechanisms to deal with climate shifts? Or is it maybe going net zero or maybe decreasing fossil fuels? So, I mean, I'm really curious to know, I'm really interested to know as to what it is where we have an overall consensus on and where we are headed with respect to the solutions that we want to this big climate problem. To you, Prakriti.
Yeah. So thank you for the question. We are heading to net zero as well. In COP 26, I guess we committed to go net zero by 2045, and also have more than I think more than 30% of our land as protected areas, and like reducing greenhouse gases and everything. And also in our policies, in nationally determined contribution NDC that we submitted to UNFCCC, we had many sectors from where we will decrease the emissions from these sectors by putting the time frame as well. So we are more into mitigation as well. But having said that, there are many other adaptation plans as well, short term and long term and medium term targets we have in adaptation as well, where we have idea about building the capacity of people, and like early warning systems and everything, doing investing more on research and research based advocacy. And also there is inclusion of youth in the NDC this time. In
Mhm.
the second NDC that was submitted to UNFCCC, it has mentioned that there will be um, inclusion of youth, the representation in the kind of forum that we have, in also in national and international forum. They have ensured that they will include the participation of youth as well. So in the policies, in the documents, we are doing very well. But in when it comes to implementation, I think it's the same case everywhere. When it comes to implementation, there are many things that that affects the documents, and like many things. So yeah, in terms of documents, we are very into mitigation as well, and also adaptation. It has been rightly mentioned everywhere that youth will be encouraged, indigenous people, marginalized people, women, will disadvantaged group will be represented, and they will be consulted when anything that happens. It has been written everything, but when it comes to implementation, we have a lot to do in the implementation part. So yeah.
I mean, these efforts are still very tokenistic in a sense that you write something off the
Yeah.
document, but it's very
Yeah.
tokenistic. Just for the sake of doing it, you're doing it. Just for the sake of inclusion, you're doing it.
Yeah,
So,
they are, they participate, they ensure the participation, but I don't think there is proper representation of these kind of like marginalized group of people. They are participated, but they are not represented well.
wow, that's a powerful statement. I think that is something, because when it comes to the core decision making processes, I think these external consultings never come into play. It is only a
Yeah,
few
yeah,
bunch of people actually deciding what is our fate, where are we headed.
yeah,
So,
true.
Prakriti, this also brings me to another very important question. So, you mentioned that Nepal is having very ambitious targets. For instance, going net zero very soon in the next decade or so. Then uh, having their nationally determined contributions very ambitious in
Yeah.
that specific sphere as well. So do you think, since I've heard from a lot of people in the global south, there is this whole narrative that people in the global south or countries of the global south could not have the amount of development that they were supposed to in comparison to the western countries or the global north, right? So they need more time to develop, and that would also mean leveraging resources like fossils, like coal, like thermal power, which is more cheaper and more accessible in absence of the climate smart technologies, which are on the expensive side. And with respect to the climate finance which is being done by global north to the global south, it's very scarce. As we already know, these targets are never met. So, do you think that your notion of development with respect to Nepal, how has it transformed or how has it shaped not just yours, but what do you think is an overall consensus about the notion of development among young people is in the Republic of Nepal, when you keep the climate change mitigation and adaptation into place, where you think that these things are also important because your country is very climate vulnerable, but at the same time you need to develop for your people to have better economic growth, to have better lifestyles, and better future of the the posterities to come. So how do you find the balance? Where is the balance with respect to the notion of development, and at the same time the need for us to limit the extent of destruction and exploitation of our resources that we've done so far? Do you, Prakriti?
Yeah. So I have to mention that Nepal has committed to promote from, how is it promote, it's promotion, yeah, from least developed country to middle income generating country by 2026. That's very nearby.
Very near.
And yeah, and then we will not get the funds and charity that are for least developed countries anymore, and we will be in middle income countries. That's a different challenge. But Nepal has decided from like has envisioned to get like less charity and more investment, I guess,
Mhm.
from 2026. And then there's another target. We will go, as I mentioned earlier, we will have 30% of protected areas by 2030. That's right, 30 by 30 we call it. So that's also the another thing that we are doing in terms of the mitigation. And there is another thing that as I mentioned, we will go net zero by 2045. That's in the also in the mitigation as well. And along with this, there are many adaptation plans in different agriculture, water, infrastructure, many sectors. So um, as I said before, in documentation part, we are like hand by hand, like we are trying to improve. We are trying to upgrade from least developed country to middle income generating country. We are also trying to conserve the nature. We are trying to go have less emission, carbon emission. We are trying to go to net zero and everything. The planning wise, it's very it looks very nice. So the only thing is we yeah, we lack the implementation part. But I'm hopeful. I'm still hopeful that we are in the track. And since we are a very one of the very least emitter countries to the carbon emission everything, so I'm sure that we will do best in the mitigation part. We have so many targets as well. But there, as I mentioned, there are many conditional target. And in the part of adaptation, we need more funds to implement the plans and policies that we have.
Prakriti, if I may put it this way, that any amount of activism without the political will would not amount to anything, right? So, for instance, taking India's example, I mean, India has been, matching and being very regular with their NDCs, and whatever NDCs that they put up, we have been doing and reaching those milestones. However, many critics argue that the kind of contributions that we actually set targets for, it's very less as per the given potential, right? As per the kind of mitigation and adaptation that could have been possible, those efforts are still very less. Although we've set targets, but those are sometimes very ambitious, or they are sometimes very delayed.
Yeah.
So eventually, they don't culminate into anything. So when it comes to the political will, the current political will, as you can sense from the government, the kind of efforts by the government that are being done for climate change mitigation and adaptation and building resilience, community power. So, what do you think is the current landscape in Nepal with respect
Yeah.
to the political will for these things?
Yeah. Um, I will start this by sharing my own example. I was involved in one of the student political like organization when I was studying in my bachelor's, and side by side I was doing all these activism and advocacy things, and I was in the political party movement as well.
Wow.
So I realized that how much advocacy and activism you do, it will not get like effective until and unless there is a political will. So I decided to, um, if you want to change the system, you need to be in it, like people say. So I decided to join the political party, and then I was in one of the leading political party. I was a member of Department of Forest and Environment of the political party,
Wow.
and I was the youngest member of the political party, and I was involved in the preparing the manifesto of our election for my political party, and I tried to include so many aspects of like climate change, and how these people are affected, how our vision, how our plans will be targeted to these kind of people. So yeah, I'm so happy that I was directly involved in preparing the manifesto of this political party, and right now our prime minister is from the same political party that I'm
Wow.
associated with. Yeah. So
Lovely.
yeah, thank you. And so I eventually I realized that okay, if you need something really like visible change, then there must be political will, and you need to be in it. You cannot always complain like our leaders are doing this and that. So
Hmm.
it's your turn to take the chair. So I felt, and then I went, I took a part, I run for the election, I won in my university, and then from there I went to the party. So yeah, that is how it is. And the manifesto that we prepared for the election, at the final draft, there were many components of environment and climate and everything. So from there I got hope again. Like hope, I got the hope, okay, it's possible, if we are willing to do this. So so the thing I want to say is, we cannot always complain that okay, we are lacking all these things because they don't have political will. They will not have, because they are the another generation, like senior
Hmm.
generation than ours. So we should take ahead and take a step and be in the system, and be the part of the change. So since I was personally involved in this, I think and other political parties as well, they have many components of environment and this protection and conservation from this election, I guess. We don't have some party called green parties or anything, but in every political party they have the component of this environment and forest. So yeah, I'm still hopeful that we can do it.
Hmm. Lovely. That sounds lovely, actually. I think there is a growing consensus among people on the requirement to have better climate mitigation and adaptation strategies put forth by these political fronts.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much for sharing that. And it sounds like a journey you had from different leaders to joining a party, drafting the manifesto, and that eventually that party coming into power. So that's a
Yeah.
great deal of things. So, thank you so much for your efforts, Prakriti, if I may say. And
Thank you.
I think this must be my last question to you. If you see the whole South Asian landscape, you see countries who share a lot of things similar, right? The kind of bureaucratic system we have, the kind of culture we have, not, I mean, not exactly similar, but a lot of similarities. The kind of vulnerabilities we have to the, with respect to the growing climate crisis. So, as a part of a South Asian country and as a leader, as a person who is engaged into climate justice movement, how do you think that a better integration, a better solidarity in terms of having spaces and platforms wherein we can share our experiences, our learnings, our best practices, so to what extent do you think these platforms can really help? Because we are thinking towards something, towards the end of this series we plan on creating a South Asian youth mentorship body for climate action, which will bring together diverse group of passionate climate activists and organizers from across South Asia to empower the emerging youth organizations, collectives, activists, with the guidance and support and the kind of tools and resources which we can provide to them, wherein they can utilize and leverage those resources to amplify their efforts and make tangible difference. So I wanted to hear your perspective on it. How do you see like a integrated body wherein we have people from across South Asian countries for the climate justice movement can help? So to you, Prakriti.
Yeah, as you said, we have very similar kind of. We are different, but we are same. Like I can say that we have similar culture, similar religions, and similar geography and everything, and Himalayas. So yeah, we are very similar in many things. It's very good idea that mm, we if we can develop something that you have envisioned that you just mentioned. It will be very great to learn each other's best practices, because since we have similar kind of topography and everything and ethnicity and everything, we can learn from each other's best practices, and also implement like effectively, and creating a platform where we can share each other's best practices is very I think it's very good idea that you have come up with. So I think yeah, it's very good idea, and I would be very glad if I can be part of that like circle someday in future, the
Lovely.
group that
That's when
yeah.
I was about to say that we'll obviously be inviting all the people who have joined us for the series, and we see this network not just a network actually, but rather as a community dedicated to nurturing the next wave of climate action leaders in South Asia. So,
Mm-hmm.
with this, Prakriti, we have come to an end for today's conversation. I think we are a little tight on time today. So, thank you so much for your presence. I think we had a wonderful conversation wherein some really crucial aspects of the climate justice movement in Nepal were discussed, and we also got to know how your experiences of being a community leader engaged into climate justice movement in Nepal uh, also gives us a shared list of experiences that both of us share, and rather our counterparts from different countries do share. So, thank you so much. We'll be hosting the next session on possibly in the coming 2 weeks. So, for our people, please stay tuned. Signing off in solidarity.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.